Okay, I hope I don't have sound issues. I have sound issues. I'm not going to be able to stream it. So, hope I got it. I apologize for the technology problems. Okay, so it looks like everything is working. I'm sorry. Just got this going. I missed the first four games, and looks like it's 2-2. Jasugi played. They played the first 50 games, so it looks like Opperwezen here has a devastating attack, and he won that. So let's look at what's going on. So these are both top players that are familiar with opening theory, and you could see the kind of openings they're playing: e4, e5, d4, the most pressing openings. I'm sure they're familiar with the theory and analysis and stockfish. So generally stockfish is probably the most important. I mean, you play a lot of games, but for top play, you have to understand it. But the computer analysis for the opening is extremely important. So Black was able to bust open f2, lost a little bit of material. It's unclear. White looks okay here because Opperwezen, I guess they said, is famous for being able to um, drain to starve the other player of material. So here Black just doesn't have enough material for an attack. Although it's possible that could change. You could force a queen trade. Um, so right now White needs to is up significant amount of material. I mean, not significant, just two pieces. Um, four pieces really, because two pieces ends up being four pieces because you get the piece back. Um, so it looks like he should be able to safely defend. I'm not sure that wins a queen, so that could be dangerous. Um, now there's mate threats on e8 with the queen placement, and he could kind of recycle the pieces. So it's a time battle here. Some tough competition. Looks like Jasugi's going to win this on time, although objectively he may not have been winning this game. So let's see what's going on here. So I'm putting in the chat. They're saying, unfortunately, chess players aren't necessarily the most friendly crew, so it's hard to promote the game. I've been enjoying this crazy house variation. Leads to pretty interesting active play, and it's conducive for quick play. So the pawn on h3 or h6 is a extremely common motive for cracking open the king side. Knight check there obviously plays with check, but just do threaten taking the pawn and then taking the rook with check. Something that has to be dealt with. Jasuge, with some pieces, could try to clean out on this side. So almost all these games will end up being we're called dynamic, with both sides attacking at the same time, which makes it relatively interesting because you only need a few pieces to keep the game rather dynamic. So here we're going to pawn mates, but you could kind of starve the material because unlike Bughouse where you have to communicate with your opponent, I mean with your partner, here you just need to control the pieces on the board. So very dynamic game here. Both sides have substantial amount of attacking play. Um, Although the initiative is extremely important, so Jasugai wins that pretty quickly and handy. It looks like he's the favorite to win. He was up 8 points in the first tournament last week, and so here you have top players. Opperwezen, who went through the processes, and Jasugi, just the top player for whatever reason, didn't want to go through the whole tryouts, and there's not much glory or fame between being good at Crazy House. You see, most of the top players are anonymous. They're not even interested in attaching their greatness of the game to their real identity. And this is only $200, $150 to win, or $50 in second place. So kind of like chump change relatively for the game. But good competition. Those who play the game, and anyone who watches my streams regularly knows I enjoy playing chess. The rating system here, I had gotten to the top 200 players on Li Chess, but the rating system, usually if you're like 400 or 500 points better, you're expected to win almost every single game. So even though I'm relatively one of the better players at this game. Um, even top 200 players. Um, these players would probably be expected to beat me basically every single game, and they probably have every single aspect of this game, put down. So Opperwezen, you know, he's out of material, and his king looks relatively safe, and those pawns right there in the center are just a real pain when like anyone who plays Bughouse knows you just start placing pawns down there on the last rank and threaten to queen. So his attack ran out of steam, and his seventh rank was loose and open. So Jasugi was able to, so he's got three in a row right here. He got kind of a closed position. So these are a lot of material drains, kind of like a French type structure, which is pretty common. A lot of people play into these French type structures. So you kind of a drain, very careful about what material you give your opponent, and kind of like a take place, take place, take place, until one side gets a little bit. So that knight, obviously, that's a fork. That's going to cause some pain. He decides just to forego his queen, although unfortunately his attack seems pretty slow. Like so he's got three pieces down here, but it's unclear what he's going to be able to do with it. So um, the question is, can Jasugai just take that knight and allow attacking like knight on h3 or something? And a lot of these games will come down to that one attack runs out of steam, and then the other player has a whole bunch of material to place, and we'll see if there's a mate. And these games, they're all 1 minute, so it just forces instantaneous calculation. And Crazy House is probably not too conducive to slow time control. It's kind of like, what can you do with the best of a short amount of time? So here, look like this game is definitely favoring Opperwezen, although these games are always dynamic. So he could have tried like knight on f2 trying to win the queen, but then that tempo in here, it's not looking good. This looks like it's going to be mate for white. So you see how these games shift back and forth very quickly. The initiative is key, and sometimes if you can't get the initiative right away, um, it it'll shift back and forth, and it'll say, can you mate, can you win material, what can you do with the material? And okay, so you got two people tuning in, see what's happening. So Jasuga is really pulling away. He's up 8 from before, so Opperwezen needs to win like at least 30 of these games, and he's starting out down. So Jasugi looks just to be in better preparation, quicker, everything going his way. And these games are pretty dynamic. Jasugi has quite a bit of material ready to place. His king is a little bit busted open, but what can he do with it? Does he have any solidified attack? And for beginning type players, you want to people play Bughouse also. You want to try to play moves that are attacking and defensive at the same time if you can. So your moves that look like they're attacking the king, plus they help to prevent your opponent from placing material that might benefit. So Jasuga is just kind of, he needs a pawn to place down there, but relatively his king sings a little bit safer, and he just decides to sack the rook. He gets a knight also, but that he couldn't run into the corner because of mate. And so he just sacks for another pawn there, and that's extremely powerful there. He's going to check, he's going to win the queen with check. So he was able to have all of that going with check. So now he's in 5 in a row, 5 in a row on his streak here. So you just see the common motif pawn at h3 opens up, knight comes, he's immediately attacking f7 and take the bishop, the attack and defense at the same time, and then he just places on g2 to defend. And now his knight, if he wants, could attack on f7, which he does right away. So now he has a long structural weakness that will take him multiple moves to defend from, although Jasugi doesn't have any direct attack right away. He's created a structural weakness, and so it's relatively unclear. So material rise is basically like 2 pieces for a rook, but it's not that much. So this game could go either way. Although it's already Jasuga has already reached the king, so kind of like a shuffle of pieces, and eventually he gets enough initiative and tempo, playing with tempo every move, until he could create a weakness that creates an attack. So he decided to go for the rook on d7 place. He could have played pawn on d3 right away, and his bishop, and so now he just decides to feed himself material, tempo on the queen. It's unlikely that Opperwezen could afford a counterattack, because if he can't play every single move with check leading to mate, his king position is too weak, and now so a pawn mates here. So so he just takes the pawn. He has to create a running square, and so he just defends the pawn move, which may not have been the best, but here he just wins the queen. He decides to take the knight. Um, the knight sack is not enough, so he couldn't. Opperwezen didn't have enough to generate a counterattack that would have been check every move. So you make a check move or something, but he's got to give the initiative back, and the material it takes to generate what's going on makes it too difficult for the attack to pander out. So let's look at this game. Another it just seems to be getting the slightly better of the opening. His initiative's coming a little bit quicker. His king's a little bit safer. All these games are relatively dynamic, where they're not complete blowaways, but you're certainly in the initiative is favoring Jasugi, and his king appears to be a little bit safer, and his attacks coming a little bit quicker. But they're making for exciting games, with enough that Jasugi is really just pulling away, winning every single game. Here, destruction 8-3. So at this level, he's got to come on like a he's got to win 10 games in a row, like, to have any chance of coming back. And just looking at this, Jasugi's careful about the material, so he seems to be generating these attacks in better positions. May have cost him a tiny bit of material. This game, Opperwezen was able to relatively safety his king and create some pressure, and he's got a large time advantage. So this game is looking like it's turning in Opperwezen's favor. He could just place pieces around the king, that rook check, and this is mate. Okay, so Opperwezen got a game there. Got the rematch going, and yeah, so let's see if I get a commentary on YouTube. Anyone was watching this, and so same plan here. Jasugi, he go down a tiny bit of material, but he's leading to creating structural weaknesses in Opperwezen's structure right away, playing relatively safety, materialistic, being very careful about the control of material. And that's one of the things in these games you see a benefit of the better players, is they're extremely careful in controlling the material, looking at their king weakness and positionally, and seeing what type of material they're giving. So here we got casting on opposite sides. I'm not sure what that pawn sack benefited for. Not sure what his strategy there. I mean, he gave a few pawns, and I guess he gets that knight in here. But so he just goes for the queen sack, and he's got to be a little bit careful. But so it looks like Opperwezen might be able to mate, and he doesn't. Jasugi probably had immediate mate if it was his move of dropping a queen on b8, but see if he could keep the tempo going. And okay, so at least he removed the knight, although, and so we'll keep on attacking with check, and so he just snaps the knight and figures that dropping a queen in the corner may not be enough, although he does have this mate threat. So I don't know if knight f4, if he's got to try to defend, and interesting. So it looks like Opperwezen just gonna lose on time. He had some interesting play there, and he ends up getting mated. So that was an exciting match. The play and tempo went back and forth quite a few times, but it ended up in Jasugi's favor. So see if Opperwezen could get a streak going, or if he's just going to relatively get demolished. It looks like Opperwezen is going to lose to Jasugi by a substantially larger margin than Jan Lee lost to Opperwezen, which says something. But just try to learn something about the game, learn dynamics of the attack. Opperwezen has a lot of material facing towards Black's King. There's a little bit of openness on Opperwezen, so material advantage could shift right away. This is looking extremely good for Opperwezen. So he just attacks the queen with tempo because that should lead to mate, and his counterplay is relatively pretty slow. So this just looks like game over. He's threatening mate next move, and there's almost nothing he could do about it. So he just drops a piece there. But the material he has to give up, he had to just sack a queen and a rook, and his counterplay is very slow here, so he could continue to attack with check, and it's going to be game over. Pawn on f7 next move and mate. Okay, so Opperwezen got that one, and okay, so they're playing mainline. The opening I play basically every time. It's interesting. I guess he plays king h8 right away, and sacks a pawn with d5 to get the bishop out. Forces him to place that pawn right away that blocks the queen coming out. So I haven't seen this variation. Unclear. So Jasugi just winning material. You're just saying they're problematic, and he just chose to win some material. So this is looking pretty good for Jasugi. His king is so safe, and he's won a substantial amount of material. See, I'm not sure. Should he take the knight, or he can't take the rook with the king because that'd be made on one with placing a knight. So he has to take there. He tries queen check, force him to place the one bishop he has, and then the pawn there. So queen sack may not be enough. So he did allow that queen sack, but I guess it does appear to be enough. So Opperwezen looks like he has mate there with enough material for the mate. So someone in the chat was commenting that Jasugi is known, playing into what are to be called known losing variations. However, in the 1 minute game, so Opperwezen's got 3 of the last 4. He needs a substantial winning victory. He needs to get like 3 out of 4, basically, for the rest of the tournament to have any chance of winning this. So we'll see if possibly going into the same openings and variations again and again, or if they're changing it up, will lead to some sort of change in the match structure. So here's one of the type positions where Jasugi has a lot of material off the board. Opperwezen has placed most of his material. Spend a lot of time chasing his queen around. So material's basically even. However, Jasugi has all his 4 pieces off the board. So we see if he could do much with tempo. This is tough. A threat of mate knight on c2. He had to come up with that knight defense, and now he just queens. Well, he sacrifices queen for a knight. That only comes back as a pawn. But this time it's still how does Opperwezen defend mate? Can he just sidestep it here? So he just sidesteps his attack threat, and so I guess knight there wasn't enough to for mate. So he goes this way, and Opperwezen still has these games are still dynamic because at the end of the day, if you can't mate him here, the tempo initiative could change extremely quickly in favor of the other side. But time ticking down. Opperwezen, look at the material on the board. All those 2 queens to place, and he doesn't really have such a good place to place this stuff right away. This should be mate. Okay, so he blocks off the running squares and gets a quick mate. So Jasugi seems to have successfully stopped Opperwezen's catch-up run, and these are going too quick for kind of an analysis of the opening. These 1 minute play, and they rush out the first few many opening moves very quickly, so it's hard to give much commentary live on the opening. But it seems every single game, Yujisuge is possibly sacking a tiny bit of material, but he's opening up Opperwezen's king right away, and and the strategy seems to be working. He seems to be getting up on the clock, very careful about the material, and preventing counterplay. And so this is already, it's pretty difficult because you could trade queens anytime. Um, it's unclear. Especially if he could feed his attack with more material. So his checks appear to. I mean, he's still got knight check there, so his checks appear to be running out. It's unclear how dangerous his king position is. So he decides to place the bishop on e2, allowing knight check, and just king over. Um, and he didn't really get any material back. So so now here comes the mate threats. Can if Opperwezen decides to sack the queen, that could put it all in. And he just tough. I'm not sure. I guess he didn't want to feed any material. He could have played bishop takes knight first, and he decides to run the king. And Opperwezen just doesn't look like he has enough time to finish it off. So all he has to do is use him. And so he could have tried doing a few spite checks, but I guess he decided to give his king a running square, and Jasugi even ends up getting a quick mate there. So you hear these games come one after the next. You see Jasugi. Maybe he changed up his opening strategy or going more classical. Defense. He's got a 5 game lead here. Now he's up almost 15 games. So just throw it up a little bit. I guess if he could have taken that pawn, but this game certainly looks a little bit better for Opperwezen, but it's still relatively close. Material is close to even, and although Jasugi's king looks pretty open, although pawn on e3 or something like that, the attack comes pretty quickly. Even if he sacks his queen, his attack comes pretty quickly. So these games are still dynamic, but something he could take the bishop or the queen. So he just takes the queen. That's actually a queen trade, and he decides to place the queen immediately for what's probably going to be another queen trade. And I guess he could keep on doing queen trades, and he decided to take with the rook, not the king. And just to place the queen right back, and then he sacks the queen, and then this should be mate. So yeah, that game, Opperwezen got a huge structural advantage right there out of the open, and now they're playing the mainline variation here. You get like a fried liver type variant. I'm not sure if he purposely went into it or just messed up his opening moves. And play, I sometimes mess up my opening moves and play knight f6 before bishop c5. And there's a lot of theory here, and computer analysis, and for these difficult calculations, you can't beat the computer calculation. So the people who've studied it, and it looks like that's just a quick checkmate. It looks like knight on Jasugi just. Oh, that's not checkmate because that pawn is hanging. But he could bring the knight back. I guess he goes back. I'm not sure what would have happened if he had played king to d7. If he had a mate, I guess just pawn on e6, bishop takes, queen takes would have been mate. So now he forces the king to stay in the open. Although, ironically, Opperwezen will get some counterplay here. So he only has one bishop to place, and Opperwezen, and he has a huge time advantage. So the difficulty. I mean, he couldn't take the bishop because his rook comes down with check. So he's got to run his king completely to the queen side, and that doesn't even work because the knight prevents him. So Opperwezen is going to be able to win this one. Although, the head looked like it was pretty good for Jasugi. You'd have to check the computer analysis to see what was going on, but the game had looked pretty good for Jasugi, and then it fell apart there. So let's see what's going on. Sorry, just making sure the sound's working. Not too many people watching this. Not sure if other people, there's other chess players that stream sometimes, but I decided to stream this and just kind of comment on this. And so we're not even halfway over. It's holding close to even, but Opperwezen needs to have a huge resurgence here. So he stopped the bleeding. It's gone about even since Jasugi had that 6-game winning streak. But see, can he kind of figure out a number to come out on return? Because Jasugi had been giving up a little bit of material in the beginning for some aggressive play, and his attacks are time wise, and this is also looking pretty good for Opperwezen, although if he doesn't have mate, so I guess he just sacks the queen or the knight there, so that there's a good move, force him up, force the queen trade, and continue the attack with check. Although, queen on g6, obviously, and he has to run his king to the center. It's going to be very difficult to survive that. But look at all that material that Jasugi has: a queen, 2 rooks, 2 bishops, and a knight. He gives him another knight, and saying if he doesn't have a mate with check, or even if he runs the king up, tries checking with the rook, he's going to have blocking. So he almost has to take the pawn, but he could block with check here, and the knight comes, king runs up. It's interesting. He could just run his king all the way up and take the rook. So fascinating here that it looks like Jasugi's going to win this, and he could just spite check until it was over. So that was interesting. You would have assumed that Opperwezen had some sort of win there, but maybe not. It's pretty interesting. You look at the material at the end, even though his king was in the center, that his king, he just couldn't finish him off, and then the time ran down. So see what happens here. Maybe Opperwezen's trying to play a little bit more safe. Trying to. He had been, I don't call it playing materialistically, but allowing Jasugi to sacrifice and getting into a little these worse structures, but into quick time control. Trying to defend in these worse structures requires more calculation sometimes than attacking. So here Opperwezen looks like he's switched his strategy to trying to be a little bit more safe, and so here it's looking pretty good for him. He's got quite a bit of material. So now he has, maybe he doesn't have a material lead because he's got 6 pieces. So ironically, he's up 6 pieces for 2 queens. So it's a interesting material dynamic. But there goes his king right out, and Opperwezen's not in immediate danger, so he could just play a little bit materialistically. He's got to take that because that's mate. Although I don't see his follow-up, so he's got to take it. So I'm not. I guess he would have lost his queen. So looks like Jasugi's probably going to win this one. Although you gotta see, it looks like he was able to win that Opperwezen. Didn't realize that all that material there, the knight attacks would be able to, and the rook would be able to mate him. So encourage people to look at these games, get kind of some of these theories for how to attack. The opening play is going by a little bit too quickly. So here Opperwezen now sacking a little bit of material in the beginning for a structural advantage. And you see it now. Opperwezen has the time advantage. That there's certainly a time advantage. It takes more time usually to defend than attack, and you hear he's relatively safe, so you just play materialistically and try to win some material. He takes the queen, and his attack continues. So this is somewhat like the dream type positions, where your king is relatively safe and your attack is going on, and you just continue and just keep on taking material. That bishop check was key, although it did help develop his knight. So now Jasugi does have 3 knights, so that's a nice move at defending g6 at the same time. So Opperwezen try to keep the attack going, sacks the queen. You just place a knight defending the weak point, but places it on the upward side of the board as opposed to the downward side of the board. And materials relatively drained. Opperwezen only has a bishop to place, so he's got to be pretty careful with his threats. I guess he sacks his queen because he feels that that's the best way to continue his attack. And this may be mate. I'm not sure. He just doesn't have that much material, so it's unclear. So he just plays the defensive move. He's up on time, and so you just snap a rook, and you're still relatively safe on the defense. So it's unclear what's going on. He just has to castle and run. He probably, I'm not sure what happened there. So Opperwezen won that one on time. It was a little bit sloppy, but a lot of confusion because of the attack and just playing so quickly that you just have to make moves. So if you're used to playing 1 minute, at some point you just have to move, and it's nice to think about the moves and try to make the best move. But in essence, you just have to move. So you see Jasugi back to his old kind of, sack on f7, create a structural weakness. Opperwezen was able to generate counterplay right away here, so it's looking pretty good for him. Although that huge structure or a hole on f7 with the knight right there on e4 makes it Opperwezen can't easily attack. He's got to very carefully assess the material that he gives his opponent and what he might be able to do with it, and like tempos and playing with check and various things. So he can't he's got the bishop check on f5 to prevent the king from running back and taking the knight. So it actually forces him up. He could keep on playing the pawn there, but here he gets the rook with check, although isn't enough because Jasugi has mate. If he tried playing pawn on g3, that would have been mate, and that would have been mate there. So his attack sputtered, and just the queen and knight to place was enough to mate. Maybe if he had thought a little longer, placed his rook a slightly different square, he could have defended. But the problem with 1 minute is you just got to move. So right away, dynamic game. You could feel the pressure of Opperwezen playing defensively, and it didn't even work. That bishop there, and he's just got a huge structural weakness with almost no counterplay in return. So Jasugi, and this is just unclear. Like I don't know what he probably could have just taken that, but he didn't. So gave him some minor amount of counterplay, and so now the game gets quite dynamic, and I guess he could have played queen takes queen, but he decided that he wanted to play a defensive move because he didn't want to be in a position where he was going to get forced mated if his attack doesn't work out with every move in check. But it looks like that was good and worked. It'd be interesting because these games are so quick to see what was the very best move that it's not really applicable to look and see what the very best move is. So not sure. No one's really watching my live stream. I don't really know who any of these players are. Most of these players just use anonymous identity, and generally chess players aren't necessarily the friendliest bunch. In fact, the better the chess player, the more likely for them to be unfriendly. So I just decided to stream it, and I'm enjoying these games, learn from the best. You see somewhat kind of the dollar value, like top players. Usually the best way to get top players to play is to pay them, because being really good at chess economically doesn't have a very strong value. So you can get the top chess players to play for not that much, like $150 to the winner. You make like $30-40 an hour, but for chess it's tough to make that. So here you have the top players doing an exhibition like this. Jasugi just perfect there. Saying no counterplay, opened up the structure, he's up material. Um, by the time I get to the rematch, they've played already these opening moves. So, kind of opening theory to play d4 right away. A lot of times, I just play d3 and get the bishops out rather than allow my opponent to make all these tempos on the queen, because then you have to be prepared to sack your queen. And these people are probably very familiar with these lines and have played them many times, so they know exactly how to go about it. And so Jasugi, tough position here. Saying Opperwezen, his queen's getting attacked. He's created a little bit of a structural weakness, but he's got all those knights in there, and if those pawns crumble, um, so he just takes, and we'll see how he tries to untangle this. And also kind of like a material bleed where he's just very careful. And I guess since he's got two knights, he decides instead of taking the pawn just to leave it there and run. Although that's a huge permanent structural weakness. Um, how quickly can he generate counterplay? It's unclear. So Opperwezen has to slow play it with the pieces on the board, or just placing to make a threat a few moves. So here's a queen sack. It's not looking good for Jasugi, but we'll see what happens. Time's less than 10 seconds down. He takes the queen and allows counterplay, so there's no immediate check here. I'm not sure if he could generate enough. He's got so much material that he could just keep on placing, and then he eventually gets a check in. I'm not sure if it's going to be enough. And the time crunch, they made a bunch of moves there, but Jasugi was able to flag him there with the pre-moves. It's usually easier to pre-move on the attack than on the defense when you're checking. So we have this comment, I don't know, the queen d5 in order to try to prevent this quick knight takes f7, and he gets the knight takes f7 anyways, and here he's going to sack his queen. I'm not sure, this is an interesting thing, queen for two pawns. The knight going down, weakness on g2. So unclear what's going to happen here. So he decides to just use his own pieces, develop his own pieces, which usually is a good strategy. And here comes the queen in, so he decides to allow the check on g2. Obviously, so he just picks up the queen, and instead of sacking the queen, I'm not sure why he didn't sack the queen and moves his king up. So now this is looking extremely good for Opperwezen, although he does have that knight and pawn there, so he's got to be a little bit careful. But and time's ticking down, so Opperwezen even has a time advantage. That queen trade would probably be devastating as it'll all come check and easy mate. So Jasugi just resigns, and so there's less than 25 games to go, and Jasugi is up over like 12 games. So Opperwezen really needs to win, 4 out of 5 of these, 80% of the rest of these games to stay in it. So it's pretty clear Jasugi is going to win, barring some extreme streak, and he's going to win by a much larger margin than Jan Lee lost to Opperwezen. So clear demonstration of top crazy house play. You're just keeping that initiative. A lot of these games, top players, they're very dynamic and both sides are attacking, and there's always play from both sides, but he just seems to be a step or two ahead in these games, and their Opperwezen's got nothing to do but sack his queen, and then he pops it right back on the board. So he could just kind of slow play it now. So he gives the queen right back. So interesting. Opperwezen has 2 queens to place. So you have one of these dynamics where you have 2 queens per 4 pieces. But sometimes the pieces, because if you have to strategically give the queen right back, and he's able to place pawns on the 7th, and it was difficult. If he took with the bishop, then that knight would have been able to take on c3, and he decides he's got to go up. He's got the rook check on the back, and a pawn would have mated. So it is not looking good for Opperwezen here, although he does have a queen to place, and yeah, he gets mated there. So the destruction continues. So okay, I don't really have anyone watching my video. That's okay. We'll see if anyone watches or comments. I like the game, but generally it's a competitive game. People play to win, so they're not really friendly. Kind of like that scene in Spartacus where he tries to be friendly with the fellow gladiator, and he's like, "Let's not get too friendly. I might have to kill you one day." So a lot of chess players take that pattern. It's not really a friendly game. You might have a handful of top players that are friendly and work together with each other, but generally it's a competitive game. Everyone's playing to win. So there's no friendship in chess play. It's all straight competitive. Jasuga has a huge material advantage here, and he's been able to safely run his king in a lot of these positions where you have the dynamic play. But Jasugi in that, I don't know if that's going to be mate. There's an interesting occurrence. I'm trying to rook there. I don't know why he played rook on g8, what he was thinking there, but I guess that was a mate, so that was a nice mate combination. I didn't see it till it landed on the board, but just closing off all the squares and then eventually getting a knight in there. So Jasugi here, now they got a slower play, d4. I guess Opperwezen figured he switched to d4, give him a little, change it up something. When you're losing like this, you got to keep on changing it up. I mean, he's not getting utterly destroyed, but he's significantly losing. Like someone who's 100 rating points stronger, might win 60-70% of games, two out of 5, 2 out of 3 games. So here Opperwezen was able to get minimal structural advantage, but he's got the dark squares, but Jasuga has the light squares, and we'll see what happens in the material grind, who create a weakness quicker, and so the game will probably continue to be dynamic here, and as time pressure faces down, we'll see if anyone's able to do anything with it. So combination of attacking, defensive moves, so both players are placing, as these games go on, you see almost all the material focusing around the opponent's king. Both sides castled on the king side, and you see the queen sides have hollowed out, and the players start to place pieces. But Jasugi here could, got a few moves tempoing the queen, and it was an interesting rook sack there. I'm not sure, but so he's got to place the rook. That was a good move on Opperwezen, recognizing that he just didn't have any material to block that check. So this looking pretty good for Opperwezen. He couldn't have taken with the queen because of pawn queening, but you look at all that material he has to place, and then he's got to just do some like spite checks or something. He didn't have any material place, but time was ticking down. But that was a good one for Opperwezen. It got a game, but Jasugi, Opperwezen looked like he might get a streak back, but now Jasugi's just kind of like slowly bleeding, trickling up, and gaining, winning 2 out of 3 games, slightly better. So changed up the variation here. Let me see what opening they played. So Opperwezen changed up the variation and just put black sacrificing the pawn to get play, but Jasugi is good defense here, so looks like he's just grabbing the material, and it looks good. I'm saying Opperwezen's already out of material. Looks like he's going to lose his queen for just a rook. He get a little bit of material, but that's a pain. That rook there is a pain to deal with. So we'll see if he. But that's mate, because Opperwezen just doesn't have any material to place. Queen on d8. If he moves the king over, So he's got to move the bishop back, and then I guess he just sacks, and it's going to be mate. So Opperwezen's attack fizzled there. So the strategy, Opperwezen trying to do what Jasugi was doing just didn't work there. Jasugi's strategy of giving up a tiny bit of material to create structural weakness didn't work when Opperwezen tried it. One thing, he gave up a lot more material, and so we'll keep it going. And so Opperwezen sacks his queen, and now looks like he's going to get the queen back, and it's unclear how Jasugi, so he's creating an attack here. He can't even take the queen right now because checkmate. So this game is looking good for Opperwezen, because his attack, for Jasugi, his attack is just quicker. He's threatening mate, and although Opperwezen looks good, but it just his attacks are a little bit too slow, and it just he's just devastated here. How does he defend c2? He's only got a knight to do it, and he's got I don't know if he has mate here, and he's got his other, the open H file, just devastating. And Opperwezen can't afford to attack. He just doesn't have time to attack, because Jasugi's attack is coming where he's feeding his attack with material. So that he could feed his attack with material, and his king is relatively safe. So maybe if Oki does a review stream, he'll look at these games more in depth and show some of the dynamics of what was going on. But just kind of get an idea. How is Jasugi winning this? What's his superior strategy? And he just seems to be better at feeding his own material needs than Opperwezen. Obviously, Opperwezen is one of the top of the game, so he's not to port this. But just in the straight up competition, that Jasugi is better at feeding his attacking needs during the attack, and so Opperwezen is constantly, his attack is dying off and he needs the material, and then he has to go on the defense. And when Jasugi is attacking, he's better at feeding the material needs with his attack. So now in this game, Jasugi has a superior structure. He's able to just run with his king, and his attack is just just devastating, as where Opperwezen's is slow, and he's not feeding his attack with material in the same way that Jasugi is. So his attack has to keep on being punctured while he has to gain material, as where Jasugi is feeding his attack and getting the material he needs to continue the attack while he's attacking. So here Jasugi appears to be running away. He's already won the match now, so the match has already been won by Jasugi, and there's 20 more games to play. So you could have a real devastation here. Some permanent structural weaknesses, but can Jasugi just eat up those pawns and feed his attack? So placing the queen on d3 would not have been good enough there. So he had to just take the pawns, but so it's unclear what's going to happen in the position right here. It's a pretty dynamic position, and those dark squares are looming down, so the queen has to run somewhere, and he doesn't have enough material to go straight for a mating attack. You're not sure what would happen if he just tried to take those pawns, but he places the knight, and pretty dynamic. That so he's able to place the bishop there, making attacking defending move at the same time, but that allowed him to get one of those bishops. I'm not sure. Can Opperwezen finish him off here? He just doesn't have enough material. Look at all the material that Jasugi has to finish him off if he can't mate him here. And he's only got pawns now. So Jasugi's all the material. He decides to sack the queen, and he seems to have messed it up. His only chance right here is just a flag win, but so it didn't work. So it was an interesting game. Opperwezen's material kind of ran out, and he didn't get to finish it off, and then just became a time scramble because these are 1-minute games. So your top players playing 1 minute, you could see a lot of the theory because they've really studied it and know these combinations and patterns extremely well. That they could clearly demonstrate some of the top level play in even a 1-minute game. So 16 games left, and we'll see what's going on here. Similar type, dynamic structure, both sides reaching out, trying to aim for the attack and be defensive. But like as usual, Jasugi just his reach into Opperwezen's position is a little more than Opperwezen's reach into Jasugi's position, making the attack likely to favor him, but not a guaranteed. And in as much that Opperwezen's getting like 1 out of 3 games. But this is just painful. The pawn right there, knight mates, let alone just to have this permanent structural weakness. And Opperwezen's attack, we saw before where those knights were able to create a weakness in there, but he just can't defend, so he resigns. And so now Jasugi going classical defense, just giving the whole center to white, and we'll look for a safe king in the corner, control the king trade, and control the pieces material. So actually he hasn't castled yet, which is because the bishop and queen nailing down on h6. So we have to see how quickly Opperwezen could try to create some sort of advantage here. He ends up opening up Opperwezen's king before he opens up his, although he doesn't have enough material to feed his attack right yet. The slow play, pawn on g5, so he just places on g6, and I guess, he didn't run up, so now he has a permanent structural weakness, and he just takes the bishop on h3, and now it's looking very good for him, although Opperwezen's play is right there. He doesn't have any real material to feed it, but he could take the bishop on g7. That's not a check, even if he doesn't defend it immediately. Look at those pawns. That's got to be, this is just very difficult to deal with, and he can't really even generate an attack. So he finally takes the bishop on g7. He doesn't have any material to feed, but 2 pawns mate, so he allows him to queen. But just 2 pawns mate. What could he do? You look at that. He could try playing like, he can't even play bishop takes g5. His queen defends it. So he has to run and just look at those pawns like a horde. I was actually playing some horde games. It almost looked like a horde type mate, and although he sacks the queen, so I'm not sure. So he got a little bit ahead of himself. He ran out of time. He couldn't figure out how to finish him off. He ends up sacking the queen, and Opperwezen comes right back there. So that's the nature of these very dynamic games, is that even though Opperwezen's getting outplayed, he's only a move or 2 behind every game. So it's not like he's getting completely destroyed. He's just a move or 2 behind. That Jasugi's attacks are a little bit more powerful. He's controlling a little bit more material. I've had similar positions to this here, so he just castles. This may favor black, although he takes that pawn, the advanced pawn there. So okay, so black just takes the rook, and white has to go materialistically, and just this definitely is in Jasugi's court. He already sacked a queen materialistically, although sometimes he's got heavy pieces, so he's up 2 queens and a rook, but he doesn't have minor pieces to defend with, and there he has to allow Opperwezen to queen, and so he queens and just takes immediately to feed his attack, and so he just has to take that pawn at e2. It's too powerful of an attack. just the long-term materialistic advantage that Opperwezen has here. Can Jasugi made him with the advantage of the minor pieces. I mean, look at this. He's got 3 queens, the rooks. Um, can this minor piece attack? Can he feed his own attack? I mean, look where he's got his king. His king has a hard time coming back. I mean, those bishops are defending f1 if something happened, but can he successfully feed his own attack? And I guess, yeah, that was mate. So I'm not sure, why he chose that. So, I mean, Jasugi, look at all that material that Opperwezen was up, but just being, the minor piece attack was able to mate the king. The heavy material was, okay, yeah, I'm streaming this, so I'm the only one streaming, talking through it. So, no one is really watching this, but I enjoy streaming and talking about this, and I enjoy the game, and try to make a little community of people who are interested in the same thing. But considering the competitive sport that chess is, it's hard to make friendships over a competitive game because most people play to win. And anyone watching my channel, I do have Nakamura coming. The chess club, Detroit City Chess Club, we do have a simul with Nakamura and Sunil Wardamantri are going to be in Detroit next weekend, and he's going to probably get paid a lot more money than these guys are. So it's pretty interesting. Opperwezen is stop the bleeding again, but at the same time, you can't really get a streak going here because Jasugi just has like a slight. If you just looked, I tried to graphically or artistically represent kind of like spatial control. If you had different how many times are the squares covered and taking control of space. So Jasugi just is when I teach kids to play, so basically you got to stake a claim in the center, develop your pieces, and create an attack. So just on the basic strategic point of the game, Jasugi is getting this huge advantage where he's just and this game's not going his way, almost no chance, but he's just getting more space and continuing with it. So it was interesting leaving his queen hanging there, but yeah, so he wins one, and so I mean, pretty even. Jasugi Opperwezen, sacking the knight to be a little bit more safe. He's had to play more safe with black, but it's not working. I mean, he's just getting destroyed right here out of the opening. I mean, he does have that bishop check, but I mean, one thing he could take with the queen. He could have taken with the queen and forced the rook off too, and seen. But he decides that he doesn't really have anything with his discovered check there, and he could just sack the queen. And that pawn is too powerful. He's got to take it, or he's going to queen. Although he could consider playing king h8, knight check. This is probably going to be mate. Although the game's not over. Because certainly if he misplays this, Opperwezen could turn it around with an instant checkmate. So he's got to be very careful about how he plays that. It was an interesting way he went about that. So the problem is Opperwezen has mate in one if he hands over the move. So he played a bunch of these moves that were he can't even take the rook because he takes back with check. So I mean, he could try playing like bishop e3. He goes materialistically. Well, it ends up a mate. So pretty exciting. Just 11 more games and it's all over. So Jasugi really pulling away here. He's going to win this by over 20 games probably. He's going to we'll see if Opperwezen could limit the damage in the last few games, but he hasn't been able to put together a streak more than like 3 games, and Jasugi just is largely slightly better every game. Opperwezen is always right there in there. Jasugi slipped for 1 second. He mated, but he just got a little bit more initiative, a little bit more space. His attack is always just 1 or 2 more moves closer to, this one's certainly looking good for Opperwezen, because he's, but materials even, and you see this position with Jasugi, I'm not sure if it's a general trend each game where Opperwezen places his material right away and Jasugi lets the material build up, but it, creates these positions where, as Opperwezen's initiative dies down, having a bunch of material to place is a huge advantage, and this is not looking good. I don't know why he brought the queen out and allowed his bishop to play with initiative, but I guess this is just going to be mate, and this attack is just too slow. So we'll see if Opperwezen could string together multiple victories in a row. I mean, it's already over the match, but if he could string together a series of victories, so we got like a French type structure again, go for more slow play, where it's just a piece placement struggle. Jasugi goes aggressive there, decides to open up his kingside structure pawns because the material on the board is very limited, and just defend his pawn on c2, play slow play materialistically. You don't have any material, you don't have an easy time getting material to feed your attack, and so what's he going to do about it? And how good is Jasugi's structural advantage? And so he's able to just sack a piece for those two pawns. Now it's looking pretty good, but at the same time, like Jasugi's threatening to take on c7. The knight takes. There's a lot of attacking potential on both sides, and so Opperwezen just sacks his queen. Does he have mate? I mean, and saying, what can he finish him off? So he decides to get a little bit more material. Yeah, that looks good. That knight d3 is just going to be mate. Knight e6, sorry, is just mate. So it was interesting, and maybe Opperwezen kind of goes overboard on his sacrifices. Like Jasugi's sacrifices seem more precision, surgical, is where Opperwezen's sacrifices may not be quite as precision, surgical. And certainly he's a much better player than I am, but just in terms of like the surgical precisionness of the play, Jasugi is definitely much more precise in the material balance and seeing what kind of material he's giving his opponent. And feeding for the attack. So, much more common you see Jasugi with a large balance of material to place than Opperwezen, less so having material balance to place. And like, okay, just these pawns there, you gotta give up material that, he could just queen. I mean, this is just horrible. This is destruction. So I mean, he just Opperwezen allowed a little bit of holes, and Jasugi immediately pounced on those tiny holes there, and it was just complete destruction. That time Opperwezen didn't even have any counterplay. So he getting these French structures again and again, and so I think Jasugi here, because he has more space, has been trying to do like a strategic crush and just control the material balance. And so now Opperwezen's trying to push his h-pawn, but obviously now that leaves g6 weakness for f7, and his kingside is pretty safe, and it's hard for him. It's hard for Opperwezen to feed his attack with material, because the more space here, likely the advantage in control of the flow of material is going to go to Jasugi every single game usually. That just the control of material and the flow of material is favoring Jasugi. So he keeps on placing material. Now even being up the queen here, the disadvantage of the queen is how do you place it to your advantage? How do you continue the attack? And it's not necessarily that easy. So I mean, Jasugi could just be materialistic and win the queen here, and these trades will probably favor him because oh, that was interesting. I don't know why. I guess yeah, I think he just made a mistake there, but it um, may be good enough. Opperwezen's got to see if he could sack his queen, and if that is going to lead to mate. I mean, he's probably going to have to sack his queen pretty soon. I mean, but this is looking over. I mean, looks like mate. Queen takes d3, and he could place on f7. He's got a double attack. I think he missed. Oh, I missed that the bishop was on h7 defending it, and I don't know. I guess white resigned. I didn't see that. I don't know if I missed a mate. So people have to look at that game. The next game's already going in here. Opperwezen, white advantage. He's immediately busted open g7, placing material in there. Looks like he's going to be able to win something. So, although Jasugi has a tiny bit of counterplay, he was able to saften up his position with his threats on f7, and so now he's down 4 pieces here. So I mean, if you look at this, Jasugi is down 4 pieces here. Most of these pieces are placed, but here he's getting some material back, and maybe not even. And so this is looking good for Opperwezen, but relatively, he's got to be careful. One small mistake on the defensive, and it could be over. And it's like, how does he defend here? And he has to be extremely careful. And also, how does Jasugi feed the material necessary for his attack? And so Opperwezen here, if he just constantly trying to play defensive moves around his king, like Jasugi could surgically break it open at some point. So see the counterattack, and then he has to be extremely careful, and that should just be mate. Or is it? Does he have the material? Yeah, so I guess he gets the queen right back, and so that should be mate. So he found a nice way to just recycle the material, and that's mate. Okay, so Opperwezen 2 games in a row. First time Opperwezen got 2 games in a row in a long time. So now we're returning to this opening. Just Opperwezen going straight for f7, classic bughouse strategy. It seems to be working, so we're just going to keep on going with it. Opperwezen somehow got the better of that attack. It's unclear how he continues with that. It's probably the best way to continue with it, although it's still unclear. He just blocks and I guess picks up material. So Opperwezen certainly has a safer structure. Material, ironically, is even. Opperwezen's only up a few pawns, but devastating. He can't take the queen because mate on g2, and I'm not sure if this strategy is enough. Like he's going to place the knight on c2. He doesn't have mate in 1, but it's just not enough, so it's not looking good for Opperwezen. I'm not sure if he has anything. Rook takes knight, probably going to lead to mate, but we'll see if Opperwezen could finish him off here. So he's just bishop check safe, force him to play a defensive move, and this is probably going to be mate, although still unclear. At least he was able to feed the attack while he was at it, but now he's got to be careful, because it's possible that if he runs out of check, that the mate will be returned, because Jasugi has enough material to force a mate. But yeah, that was it. So Opperwezen getting 3 in a row there. I'm not sure if it was the first time. Definitely many games. You must say it's not too little too late, because all these games are interesting, and even if you just notice some holes in the strategy, or if it's just that whatever's causing that, but see if Opperwezen could come back in these He was only like 4 games left, but see if he's got or 5 games left. See if he could come back a little bit. Jasugi's queen play a little bit loose, so um, he's got a queen for 2 pieces. Although Jasugi has noticed a hole and he was able to pounce on it immediately, and now he has permanent entrance into his position, but it's a little he's able to castle and run away, but just a permanent weakness that he just keep on picking at, and just keep on picking at in a way that doesn't allow Opperwezen to get counterplay, because all of it comes with tempo. And although he's relatively holding, Jasugi keeps on chipping away, getting a little bit of material, and Opperwezen can't get a tempo to start with a counterattack, although see what's going on right here. Like now it seems that things might be favoring him, although it's unclear. Look at all this material. Look, Opperwezen has a whole 2 queens, a rook to place, but Jasugi just keeps on pounding down the pressure, and it looks like it's his game, but time now, it's just going to come down to a time scramble, and he plays blunders. He didn't even see that he could take in the queen, and now it's just going to be quick placement, and Jasugi was able to flag him there. So that was unfortunate, but you could see that Jasugi had the initiative almost the whole game there, and just eventually started to crumble. But having the initiative usually makes it easier to gain time advantage, especially in these 1-minute games that could be devastating, that time advantage. But so even if your attack isn't 100% right and there's holes in it, you get enough of a time advantage by the time your opponent diminishes your attack. It could be too late. Although, just look at this Jasugi. He opened up his king a little bit, but he just was able to create so much pressure that he looks like he's about to win the queen. He doesn't really have a good way to sack his queen and get counterplay. That was an interesting try just to get the pressure off of d4, but he could just sack his queen. He probably could have just taken it and placed the defense with tempo, and here he just decides to completely forego his queen, because look how much safer his king is. Knight on h3, like his bishop's defending. But can he finish him off with the attack here? So he is down 2 queens and a piece, and that looks pretty devastating. Looks pretty devastating. We'll see. That you can just mate. Okay, yeah. So that was a little bit devastating. Like he had a huge structural advantage there, just the guy, but Opperwezen was able to come in and blow him open. Like his materialistic, somehow his he just couldn't capitalize. Like sometimes attacking with all knights, it's difficult to find the right move. And he just couldn't find the right move, and Opperwezen was able to turn the initiative into checkmate. But here you have again, similar to the game we had a few games ago, where Jasugi 2 games ago, where Jasugi won on time. He just created that structural weakness, and now he's just going to keep on pouncing him with tempo and see if he could do anything. Because so he sees the weakness on b7, just castles kingside, and now Opperwezen has to redirect his forces to the king side, but as usual, Jasugi is just first on the initiative, so the attack in almost all of these positions is first going to Jasugi. So the initiative here, the attack of the balls is in his court. You could just win material, and this is not looking good. The mate threats are Jasugi was good enough to find that mate instantly, but somehow the things just collapsed, and Opperwezen didn't even get an attack rolling. So a lot of these times you have a few back and forths where Jasugi will have the initiative first, and then the okay. So interesting. A quick bishop to h3 and the king run up. So interesting, but can he drain the material from him? That it is a relatively close position, and can Opperwezen get the material necessary for his attack? Although he's pretty solid here, but so you're seeing these kind of like bughousey type thing. One side goes on the attack, and then it sputters out, and the other side has a chance to attack, and they're very close to mate a whole bunch of times, and it might maybe get some time pressure, or maybe one of the attacks come through. So here you have Opperwezen completely out of material. He was probably going to have to sack his queen at some point. He could have tried defending it, but rather than let the initiative change, and even with sacking his queen, the initiative left him a little bit. And the question is it mate? So yeah, I guess White resigned. He was able, that time Opperwezen was able to feed his attack enough with his attacking pieces, and Jasugi's attack was too slow to do with tempo. So there was, the strategy that Jasugi had been beating Opperwezen. So this is your final game here, and you'll see what's happening. It's hard to comment on these first games, so I'm just kind of giving like a overall, who has the initiative, who has the better structure, more space, because it's giving variations in these 1-minute games. These play so fast, and by the time I start a new game, I've already missed the first few opening moves to talk about opening theory. So it's really just too quick to get too deep into it. But so it looks like Jasugi is about to win from the same margins as before. So he's going to have about 2/3 winning percentage, and another type game. Both sides have a lot of attacking potential, and it's just tempo. This is, as the previous games, Jasugi is a little bit ahead on the tempo. His attack is coming a little bit quicker, but should it fizzle, Opperwezen has a decent amount of material and chances to return, and I'm not sure what happened. I think okay, so he won the queen. So Jasugi decides to win the queen, and it wins. That was mate. So Opperwezen wasn't able to use those pieces around his king to make a defense, and so that's it. It is over. And I'll put a stream in there. I don't know if any of the fellow chess players, Crazy House players, are going to watch this. You got a few people watching it. Who's this? Acoustic Files. I guess someone I gave a wrench to changed their name. I don't know who. Oh, this is Jay. Okay, so welcome, Jay. Thanks for tuning in. Got Jay from England, and these players. I think they're both in Europe. So final score 68-42. I think he meant 58-42. Yeah, so 58-42. A little bit larger margin than Opperwezen had beat Jan Lee, the former champion. So Jasugi's putting up there that like he appears to be the best, or so. So I mean, doesn't matter. Like I did my stream on kind of the ego trap and what are you playing chess for? It's kind of a kid's game. You see, Jan Lee came in, and the nature. So it's a fun game, and like it's hard to feed your ego too much on this game, but it's interesting. So I streamed it. Let me see if I do a quick thing. The Horde tournament. I played 2 Horde games, and I'm about to head down to the temples. Let me see if I get another Horde game. This one was pretty interesting, and I'm actually statistically better at Horde than I am at Crazy House, although it's not as common, so there's less tournaments. So here's the monthly tournament on Sunday. They have a tournament every night at 9 o'clock, and I was petitioning them to change the name of Horde to Peasant's Revolt. So you see, this game, one side gets all pawns, and the other side gets their pieces, and the goal is to win. So it's interesting seeing all pawns. How many pawns do you need to overcome pieces, and kind of like the spiritual, theological implications. So I'll see Captain Caveman, welcome. Yeah, just doing some chess. Like, I have a lot of streaming. I have minor computer issues. Um, but the main reason I haven't been streaming is just because of time-wise. So I'm going to berserk this, and I got a weaker opponent rating-wise. So we'll see if I could, give a nice demonstration of how to win with the pawns here. So I forget the exact calculations. You have 32. You start with 36 pawns versus the regular set, and point wise in the old classical system of what the pieces count for. So he's already allowed me to get like a huge bind in there on them. He's almost got no way to develop his pieces now. So I just got to bind, and I could keep on pushing it in, and I could slowly walk all of these pawns up, and he has a hard time even sacrificing to help himself out. So he does have this pawn stopped, so I can't push g4. Okay, so he decides to just give a piece up. I better take that, and I'll take that, and then I'm gonna play here. So he's, because this rook here is on the file, I can't push this pawn without him taking. So he doesn't really even have any good sacrifices here, so I'm just going to prepare d4, and then you'll see how to play. Like, he can't really develop any of his pieces. You can't even really make serious double threats. I better take that. Don't want to leave hanging pieces, but so let me see what I have to do here. So I did berserk him. I have to be a little bit careful on time. And so I'm going to take this way. Try to push these pawns up a little bit. He sacrificed prematurely there. Now he can't even. He is threatening to come in there on me, so I gotta be a little bit careful. So that's unfortunate. That could have been a good move on his part. I don't want to give up too many pawns. So if I play pawn here, he could play queen there and get in on me. Otherwise, but I think I could just play pawn there and defend up. So I don't think queen there, pawn there. And then if he goes queen back, I have pawn there, and he can't enter. So there would have been a little concern. So I got to play quickly though. So the time. So I was able to. It's kind of like, if people remember the game Breakout or Arkanoid or something, when you get your queen behind the pawns, you just nip them all off very quickly. So I had to think there for a little bit to prevent him from being able to get his queen there. And now I could just push these pawns, and so just like as you're holding hands, the Peasants revolt. If there's unity between a few people, it's hard to defeat unity. So his king is running. He doesn't really have any breakthrough. That bishop is complete. These pieces are completely blocked off of this side of the board. I'm going to play one more move, and then basically I'm going to play f3. I might even try pushing some of these pawns up a little bit more first. Just get him a little bit closer. I don't think that helps him. Take it. I'm going to be able to play f3. I'm going to have to sacrifice some sort of pawn, but I'm not sure if I play either pawn there and then pawn there. But this is looking extremely good for me here. It should be a quick victory. He could take this pawn, but he doesn't have. The rook's not going anywhere, and now I'm approaching. He's approaching the danger zone. So there I got a pawn on the 7th rank. It's defended. I could just pawn here, pawn there. He can't even use his queen to try to double attack. Oops, I gave him that pawn. I get a fork back here. I guess I'm going to do it. I think I'm close enough. I mean, he get the rook now. Now he could play like, get the rook down to the later file, but my pawns are just too far advanced here that I don't think he's got a way to come back. I mean, just pawn there. He can't stop it. I'm going to be able to get a queen and win this. So you can see the power of the pawns to force victory. Down, I just got the time warning that I'm down, but here comes my queen, and it's gonna all be over. He can't stop if he moves the queen. I'm just gonna check. If he trades, it's all over. So you see the power of the pawns to push through. He allowed me to cramp his position right away from the beginning. So that gave me, I think that was my third victory. So I don't know. I'm gonna have to leave. I'm gonna go to the Hare Krishna temple in a few minutes. So maybe I'll see if I get another game. I'm in the top 20. That was a berserk, but it's gonna be too much play. I only have time for like 1 or 2 more games, maybe 3 games. So like the top beginning, Shimonov beat me the first game. Felistine beats me pretty regularly. I haven't played some of these guys, but it's an interesting community here. And okay, habitual chess. This guy's beating me 5-0. So if I lose this game, I'm gonna call it the last one and head off to my yoga. And okay, so he allows. Not sure which side to go. I guess I'm going to go back this way. Go here. I'm going to create some sort of counterplay. Just give myself a g6 threat. Okay. So actually, kind of like my position here. I'm not sure what's going on. Try to loosen the structure up a little bit, although I'm gonna play like pawn here. I gotta break through some way. So gotta come up with some sort of counterplay attack. You're probably just gonna play e4. And I go back. I could try to reroute my bishop to attack this way. It's probably my current best strategy. So we got a relatively close game. Okay. So yeah, I was thinking castle, maybe try some rook sacks or something like that. I'm not sure. So I could take queen there. I mean, I seem a little bit slow, but I don't know if I have anything better. I got to come up with something, and I don't really want to sack both of my rooks because rooks are very good at defending the back rank, but I got to come up with some sort of counterplay. So I got my king, looks like it's holding off this side, and I should be able to, I still got some pawns on my bishop, so I actually kind of like my position here, although I'm not clear how quickly he could develop some sort of counterplay. Okay, almost definitely have to take, and then take there. Okay, I think I'm gonna take like this, and then take this bishop, and this pawn, I probably messed that up. Okay, so I'll go like this. If he defends this pawn, I could get this pawn in and attack. And, so it's going to come down to the line. I don't have a rook for the last rank. If I had a rook like here, this position would be extremely alluring, but I don't. So, have to come in this way. My queen is coming back. Take some pawns. So we got to see if his pawn mass here is going to be quick enough, to be able to slow down his pawns here. Snap, 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 because pawns move very slowly. So you can just snap, snap. Now I'm threatening this one. Snap. He allowed me to take a lot of pawns there. So now we just got to keep on snapping to see if he runs out of pawns to continue the attack. I think yeah, just my king should be able to stop it. So this game looks like I won one. So I finally beat this guy. This guy had a 5-0 record against me, and it's not looking good for him here. I just go like this. I mean, he could remote possibility for like some sort of stalemate, but unlikely. He's got to push some sort of pawn. He's got nothing. So, I thought queen there, but I don't even see, he doesn't really have any good stalemate possibilities. Now he's got a queen, take, and it's over. So this guy had 5-0 against me. I finally beat him, but my standing here, so I'll try one more quick game. John, thanks for joining me. Hopefully we'll talk again. If you want to join the Week in Review Church of Entropy, hopefully, I haven't spoke with her today, but I assume we'll be doing the Week in Review in 4 or 5 hours. I'm about to go to yoga and then come back. So if you want to join the Week in Review this week, John, that'd be great. So, Church of Entropy, assume you know her. Oh, she's in the chat also. So glad to see Church of Entropy. Thanks for joining. So looking forward to the Week in Review. At Amma here last night. So I'm 2-0 against this guy. I like the spiritual implication of this, like, Horde, regular chess, like all pawns, Peasants, Revolt. Like I talked like Norvin or kind of like the JQ, and it accused people of trying to wage a Peasants Revolt. So this is really kind of like Peasants Revolt. What would you do if it was all pawns? So I think I've been getting, the computer says F6 is a bad move. I haven't been playing that, but it seems the computer doesn't like it. And I think I could just hold that pawn there. So he's got to go back, and then I'm not sure if he could rework his knight to somewhere useful, or if his bishop is good. Maybe he plays h5 here. Right away, but I think I'll allow him to take. So if he takes, it let me bring this pawn to the king center and still semi-hamper his development. So let me push in here like this. I think I could just hamper his development, although I'm not sure. So now I got this pawn like stuck in him pretty hard, and so I probably have to take, although he doesn't have a take back. So let me think. So this is a 5-minute game. Let me think about the best room. I take here. Obviously he's going to take, and then take. So, but his knight doesn't actually have anywhere to retreat. So I think I'm going to take that pawn first, because I don't want him taking me there. And if he takes here, I'll come back, tempo the rook. So, okay, so go like this. So if he could work his queen around here, he could probably sack and open up my king side, although it's slow. You know, I'm going to get pawn here and, you know, get a nice defense in. And I think I'm going to be able to play pawn here. I'm not sure which one was best, but, you know, so now at this point I've depleted his pawn force, and I play Fisher random too. Oh, that's annoying. That's really annoying. I really messed that up. That's going to be bad. I have to play pawn here. It's my other move. I really missed that move. I should have... I needed to play like a defensive move first, like pawn there. So that could cost me the game. I mean, queen there would have been too quick to let him in. So I mean, if he takes... I get like pawn here, defending, and... yeah, I have no choice. He's really ripped me open. I really messed that up, so he's probably going to win this game now. You know, that was a huge blunder. This move right here, pawn there. If I just played pawn there quickly first, I probably would have been significantly better. Now he could... probably have to win the bishop. Okay, I got to defend that pawn. So I mean, you take this pawn. This is looking really ugly. But I got to... I can't have all my pawns stuck behind that one, and he still gets that, you know, inside of me. So okay, so let's see. I got slow his queen getting down, kind of, you know, try to have his queen like a little bit trapped behind my pawns, but it's really too slow. Like this goes there. I mean, he gets his queen right back in there, so I'm probably lost that game, and that's fine. I'll go to I'll go to the temple. I'll lose this game and then go to the temple, but you know, maybe I'll look at the computer analysis just to show how I messed that up. I mean, I have remote chances because, you know, it's open, and his queen doesn't have your direct play and attack. So, you know, he's able to just defend, and he could just snap this pawn. I got nothing. I can't really stop him from just taking these pawns. And just too slow. If I had one move there, yeah, I might have been able to generate some counterplay, but I didn't have one move there. And so yeah, he's almost certainly got me here this game. Okay, so I mean, he doesn't have to sack his rook, but you just yeah, I'm done. So I'm going to resign this, and let's see what the computer analysis says. I definitely liked my position for a while. Okay, so it didn't actually like my blocking the structure up there, and you know, his sack here was premature. It likes just taking it, so my whole idea there was just bad. I should have just taken it. And here I created, I guess it tells me I should have just given up that pawn. And then here, so yeah, this was a bad move. It was unnecessary. Yeah, I misplayed it, and this move is just horrible. So here, this move here just gives up. I played like many other moves. I still have the advantage, and after this, it's just over. There's no way for me to come back. you know, e5 was my only chance really, and it just doesn't work. Just like f4 more. Okay, so I gotta go, and I'm gonna end the stream. Thanks for tuning in. Hopefully I have the week in review later today. And thanks for tuning in, everyone. Be blessed. So John, hopefully you could join the week in review later, or we'll talk at a different time. Glad you joined our streams. For everyone, have a good day. I'm still here because it doesn't want to let me end the stream. Let me figure out how to end this stream. It's giving me an error. Try to end broadcast. So I read that, so I'm still here. See what happens. I don't know how to manually end it.